An identity, or ego, is a self-referencing, repeated pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing that our ego can reference and say, that's me compared to someone else, and that other egos say, yeah, that's him. That's the guy whose hairs look like this, who talks in this tone of voice, who says these things and not these things. That's identity. Now, we can have multiple identities, and what I want to explore is the intricate relationship between identity and environment. Because we have a root identity, the sense of us that we say is me, even distinct from me in a bar, from me at work, from me talking to you, from me lounging in the pool in the Philippines. Every environment rewards different thoughts, different behavior, different words, and the consequent feelings that emerge from those words relative to other environments. So if you plant a fern in the shade with moist soil and X amount of pH, a fern grows, and the rose withers and dies. If you plant the fern out in the hot sun with no water, etc., the fern dies, but the rose or the succulent blooms. And so what we tend to find in reality is a strong correlation between environment and identity. And one could say, to the extent that we are responsible, able and willing to respond, to create an environment, that we should begin by choosing the environment, by choosing the identity that we want to invite into the space, and then curating an environment that produces that identity in aggregate, in overall statistically, as a result of rewarding certain traits more than others. Because the underlying matrix in all of these correlations between identity and the environments that reward them is the underlying drive and consciousness to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. And so an identity, a cultural identity, which is the primary environment for the ego. You have the physical environment as the primary environment for the body. And planets that have high oxygen, to give an example, will selectively breed for high oxygen consuming mammals. Planets that have low oxygen will selectively breed for mammals that have, and other animals and things that require low oxygen. And this is simply done by all animals that require high oxygen in a low oxygen planet die off, or if they have the mobility, leave. And what remains is low oxygen plants and animals. And those continue to, as nature always does, produce in a cacophony of variety. And in that process, more and more low oxygen needing plants and animals grow, and so there's a correlation between the physical environment and the physical bodies that are produced statistically in that environment, and there's a correlation between the cultural environment and the egos that reside in that environment. There is a correlation between the cultural environment and our identity. So we start with the infinite possibility field of environment and the infinite possibility field for identity. And eventually what we end up with are, as human egos, identifying with a particular environment. This is my home, my community, and my country. This is my culture. These are my beliefs, etc. And there's a strong correlation, statistically speaking, between that culture, environment, and the individual ego. So what pushes those two together? What are the forces that, when you're dealing with an individual ego and identity, particularly, we have, a very high obsession with the individual in the United States because we have a very high obsession with the individual in the United States. So if you're born into a culture that focuses most of its attention on the individual, then you will have individuals in that culture who focus most of their attention on themselves and on other people as individuals, though, of course, mingled with other forces in the United States, for example, racism, where an entire skin color is loaded with various descriptions relative to one another. And then those loaded descriptions are given hierarchical value assignments. Let's say you discover statistically that African Americans are more predisposed to dance than a Caucasian. And you just do a sample of 1,000 people in this environment who have darker skin and 1,000 people who have lighter skin, and you discover every time you do this that the darker skinned individuals enjoy dance more, are more likely to move into tune, tend to like certain music a little bit more than the comparison study. So you say, okay, that's the loaded thing now, more likely to dance. But then there's another loading that says, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? And all cultures are self-referential. The root word of culture is cult. And a cult is a cult because it references itself more than it references objective intelligence. So, for example, in a non-cult, you would look out and you'd evaluate how to engage in that moment starting from ground zero. So you'd say, is it good to say anything at all or not? Which would produce more well-being? Maybe I'll try this one, see how it goes. Will I ask someone how they are doing if I'm in a hurry? If I don't want to hear how they're doing, I don't think I'll ask how they're doing. So if you're not in a cult, you evaluate your decisions amongst all of your available options. This person seems very depressed. Why don't we greet them with a hug rather than a hello? Well, on a statistical level, this could be considered intelligent because the endorphins produced in a 7-second hug correlate with an upbeat and of energy, and most people don't prefer to feel depressed if they could have a switch that said, I'd like to be depressed, I'd like to have a bit more energy if they're feeling depressed. Most people, given the choice, they would switch the switch to they'd like a little bit more energy, so I'm going to give them a hug. But of course, if I'm a cult that says that that's disrespectful, and disrespectful people are bad, well then I'll let them suffer in depression because I wouldn't want to be disrespectful. And so things get loaded into, are they good or bad for being what they're being? That's a secondary level. And so a lot of racism is created, just like a lot of cultism in all areas of life are created, simply by saying, this is me, and it's me because it's me, and it's me because I belong to this group that does the same thing, and it does the same thing because it's the right thing to do, and we know it's the right thing to do because we do it, and we do it because we did it before, and we did it before because we did it before, and we can't really remember the first time the cult sat down and said, you should ask everyone how they're doing when you don't want to know. You should say you're fine when people ask how you're doing. You should always, when someone sticks out a hand, thing, and then grip this amount, but not this much pressure, and not that much pressure, but this amount of pressure is the right thing to do. When did these things happen? Why don't we do a little dance that'd be more energizing than a firm, stern handshake, which doesn't leave one with, so why do we do this instead of this? Because it's a cult. Because the root word of culture is to be cult-like. We do it because we do it, and that's who we are. As opposed to we do it because I, as an individual, have evaluated all of the different options available to me, and I've determined that scientifically, speaking based on the data, this is the most likely thing to bring well-being. And certainly for people who are in a cult and afraid of being out of a cult, the most likely thing to produce well-being is to be part of the cult. If you're in a cult where everyone bows to the sensei, and you decide that you'd like to experience the radiance of the sensei and look at them rather than ignore them. Because when you've got this wonderful person in front of you that you've decided is wonderful, and so they're wonderful because you've decided they're wonderful, and there they are, and you think, the wonderful person is here, let's not look. Doesn't make any sense to me, so I'm going to look and enjoy the wonderful person. But now you're not part of the cult. What's that? There's a deviation in the cult norm. The meme has been encroached upon. That means a little bit of me, my identity, is being eroded. I'm part of this cult, and this cult is me. And this cult bows to the sensei. And you say you're part of this cult, but you're not doing the cult meme. So either you're making me confused and now I don't know who I am because I thought what made me part of this cult was doing this and this and this, and you say you're part of that cult, and you're confusing me. Who am I? How can I be this? And so we get angry. Our identities get angry when they feel insecure. And they're insecure when they're undefined, erratic, volatile, hypocritical, disintegrated. We're a cult of honesty, except we always lie to cover up the leader's affair. Meaning the leader lies to his partner, and we all pretend that it isn't happening, and then we listen to the leader's lectures on honesty and transparency. Who am I? Am I the one that covers up lies for the leader, or am I the honest person in the honest school espouse? Who am I? So we get uneasy, we get uncomfortable, because identities like to know who they are. They like to say, I'm this and I'm not that. And this is difficult in a scientific sense. Because there are innate links between all energy and all energy. Meaning there is no isolated thing that you can put into language that you cannot make a relationship with, which means that the isolation within a paradigm is an illusion. Someone says, no. Toilet paper and Buddhist holy man. Okay, so there's no relationship between that. Well, does a Buddhist holy man use toilet paper? Could that be one relationship? Are they both made of atoms? Another relationship. Do they have an electrical current? One perhaps through friction, the static electricity that can be, generate. And do they have color? Do both the monk and... There's just so many relationships that connect all things. Antimatter and matter, surely there's no connection there. Well, how can you be anti something that there's no relationship to? So there's obviously a connection there. The police and criminals, no relationship. Except don't police do for the state exactly what criminals do for their own state? Isn't the difference between the criminal and the police a formality? So how do you respond? And the mind can hold these nice little compartments, but they don't hold up to science. Science can find layer upon layer upon layer upon layer on multiple dimensions of interconnectivity. So how am I me and not this other thing when I'm so interconnected with all of it? And so you could say that identity is a fragile illusion that is as fragile as the 10,000 cultures estimated by anthropologists just in recorded history. See, we don't really record that much more about people than about 12,000 years ago, and that's pushing it because there's a lot of divergence even in that story amongst archaeologists trying to decide, were people that were smart getting dumber? People were smarter 10,000 years ago, then they got dumber, and then they've gotten smarter again? Or was that not what was happening at all? And could anything have existed more than 10,000 years ago as far as human culture? But anyway, it's estimated that 10,000 cultures in human history have already come, and of course most of them are gone. Where are the 10,000 cultures on the planet today? We're hard-pressed to find about 200. 10,000, 200. Now that's a high mortality rate. What it means is that cultures are ephemeral. They're ephemeral patterns of energy that come and are superseded by other cultures. And sometimes they go out with a fight, meaning every culture in human history has determined in its own self-referential way that it is the best thing that ever has existed and that ever will exist and that does exist. And therefore to fight to perpetuate our pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing is the duty of the right, because our culture is right, and it is the best, and it's number one. Now, every single cult in human history has made that claim. And at least 9,800 of them are wrong. Meaning that if they were truly the be-all and end-all superior cult, according to evolutionary theory, which is one of our current cults, they should be still winning. It's also statistically a difficult bet If you say, here's a sample of 10,000 people, and every single one of them knows that they're right, and they're all different, and every one of them knows that they're better than all the other ones. Now, if you're a bettor, and you're betting on who's right, statistically speaking, you'd place $1 on each one of them. But ultimately, they're all wrong. All things change, all environments change, so the habits that create this feeling of sustainably feeling better and avoiding feeling chronically worse change with them. The habits change as the environment change. All things change. So the religion, the hair pulling and beating and nails and monks, butchering, butchering, all the butchering that went on in Christianity, it's not going on today. Because back then, the Christians ganged up with the monarchs to have holy conquests of other lands. And there's not that much land to conquer these days that is efficient to conquer. And so all the raping and pillaging and torture and execution, that went on in the Dominican region when Spain decided to mine gold out of some of the islands. I think it's in the Caribbean. That's not happening right at the moment because that gold was already exploited. And so now there's a different version of Christianity, a softer version, a nicer version. And those bits are kind of being deleted because who wants to be the person who reduced a native population by 90% in order to steal gold for a patriarchal king in the name of God? Who really wants to say, yeah, that's my identity. I'm the raper and pillager. I'm the materialist. I'm the shallow hypocrite. That's me, the Christian. No, so that bit gets faded off and then new bits get added in so that the narrative can survive. Because if that was the only narrative, nobody would want to identify with it. And people have to identify with being Christian in order to give the church money. Otherwise, it fades out. And so at the point when the church can no longer offer an identity, a habit of thinking, feeling, speaking, and doing, that people say, yeah, I want to be that. That's the death of an identity. It's the death of a cult. It's a death of a culture. And the odds do not look good. Meaning what history tells us is that 10,000 years from now, there's a 99% chance that what's happening here in this cult will be forgotten, obsolete, ridiculous, unappealing to the identities of that time and of that place. And 10,000 years after that, the same will be true. And 10,000 years after that, the same will be true, which we might as well acknowledge that every single thing going on today on the planet, outside, electrically, will change over a period of time. And as it changes, the identity will change with it. But what's pressing environment and identity together? Well, there's kind of a light side and a shadow side to pushing identity into alignment, with cults. And on the darker side, we have the viral nature of identity. When one person shot up a school in the United States, when one student did, a whole bunch of other people said, yeah, that's the way to get rid of all my frustration. I've been feeling frustrated and helpless, and no one's giving that any attention. And that's been going on for years. And all that I knew how to do was to feel frustrated, angry, and have no attention. But now I look what happened. There's other people. They got attention and they feel less frustrated now. Okay, so the meme spreads. So there is a viral nature of identity regardless of what's going on. You see it in positive and negative directions unconsciously. 3 people smile at you, and you are more likely to smile at the next person than if 3 people scowled at you. There's a viral nature to identity. Now, the other thing is outlined in Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. Need number 1, survival. Need number 2, security. Need number 3, love and belonging. Now, in a population run by people, or in a planet that is largely influenced by human beings, if you want to survive, and if you want to feel security, and if you want to have a sense of love and belonging, the best way to accomplish all of those things is to copy what the majority is doing. So if you want to survive and invent a new language that you're the only one who knows that language, yeah. Now, that was very intelligent, except you're not understanding what it means, which means that I don't get the glass of water that I get if I say, please give me a glass of water. Now, a language of one is less efficient than the language 99% of the people around you are speaking. So English is currently the language of the majority. Meaning if you know English, you can ask for a glass of water more places around the world and get it than Mandarin, than German, than French, than Spanish. Of course, if you're in Spain, asking for a glass of water in Spanish, the odds go up over English. But if you had to pick one place and travel around one language and travel around the world, you have English is currently the most likely. And so the need to survive is the need to copy, to conform. I'm going to learn the language of my family and my community rather than hold out for my own language. I'm going to, with the learning of that language, learn the values and mythologies of that environment. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what about the word hug? Now, the word hug means the gentle moment of silence after speaking that is the most important part of a conversation. Hug. Now, you've never heard anything about the gentle moment of silence after speaking. What you've heard about is a dead silence, an uncomfortable silence. And there is a dead silence and an uncomfortable silence in the English language. But there isn't a gentle and delightful silence on the other side of speaking. And even if there was, in the English language, and remember that all language correlates to thought, there is no value placed on that gentle silence on the other side of speaking. And there is a great value placed on being busy, being efficient, hurrying up, and filling the void. So they broke the uncomfortable silence. Thank goodness. Good job. They were a professional at being English thinking. But they were a disaster at being hug thinking. They were a disaster because they ruined the silence that was on the other side of words, that was so much more fun than all the little gibberish and minutiae of the words, the sweet and gentle sounds on the other side of speaking, the bonding that transcends language. That's what Hug is, and you've never heard of it because you copied your family and learned English. And English doesn't have a word because it doesn't have a thought, because it doesn't have a value for the feminine, for the yin, that would be high enough to invent a word, to put together a thought for the savoring of space, of silence. On the other side of words, it doesn't have a paradigm that honors the yin in the polarity of yin and yang enough to value the silence that is far more vast than the noise that punctuates it. This comes and goes. This is ephemeral. The space in between, the silence in between, the stillness after the movement is vast. And it is frightening within a Western paradigm. And so, when there is silence after words, if you're an American, you look down, you fidget. Okay, I guess that's it. Let's get moving. That was awkward. That was awkward. There was space. There was silence. Someone must have not had their game together. I wish I'd had a witty thing to fill the silence with. And I wish they had been a little bit, didn't just stop talking like that. That was weird. What does weird mean? Out of alignment with your cult. For better or for worse, it's scientifically neutral to diverge. It depends on what it's being referenced, what's being referenced to it. So, the need to belong, which does increase your survival and security, leads to the pressure of these things coming together. And, of course, language, which we just talked about. Because how can you experience something you're not conscious of? How can you become conscious of something you can't think? And how can you think something when there are no words to say it? Now, the other, and one of the most profound reasons why you can spot a member of a cult, if you spend a little bit of time, and you've spent time in the cult, right? I was once in Thailand, and I had a double take. A Thai woman was getting ready to kite surf. Now, I was there with German men and Russian men and English, British men, kite surfing, and a few Thai men. So, nothing strange there. You go to Thailand, it's one of the nicest and cheapest places to kite surf. If you want to learn kite surfing in the San Francisco Bay Area, $150 an hour, cold water, no pina coladas waiting for you on the beach, minimally nice scenery, no soft sandy beaches. Fly over to Thailand, $30 an hour, wonderful food, warm water, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, it's not surprising that the identity of kite surfing would exist in an environment that has low barrier, low cost, low friction of entry, and high return on investment, right? Now, you still find kite surfing, out at the local beach here in San Francisco, but it's less so. But I wanted to know what this Thai woman was doing, suiting up. So why? Because it's not normal. It's not fitting into the cult. Now, how did I know this? Because I'd asked over 100 Thai women to swim with me. And I'd watched their reaction. Oh, I don't like swim. Why? You've got the nicest beaches? Oh, no, I don't know. So I knew that the cult, for its, and this is the thing to understand about cults. They are all insane. There's never been a cult that does not have at least part of its meme, part of its identity, make no sense whatsoever to the objective observer. The objective observer in me said, why do all the American women I know how to swim when all they've got is swimming pools to enjoy? A beach, a snorkeling cacophony is 10 times healthier, meaning no chlorine and all that. It's free. You don't have to have a membership. More interesting, more beautiful. This is a great place to know how to swim. Why do all the women not know how to swim? And there's only one answer that any cult can answer about why none of its people do intelligent things in certain areas, and every one of its people do crazy things in other areas. And the answer is everyone else is doing that way. So it's not like there was a meeting of cultures and said, let's see, we're going to have to erect $100,000 swimming pools in order to teach our children how to swim. You've got island upon island, huge coastlines and beautiful free water. Whose cult should teach its people how to swim? Whose cult should teach its people how to run businesses? Whose cult should learn how to strip mine the planet? Whatever it is. I think we'll take this. There's no intelligent breakdown based on we should do it because we have this. No. For some strange reason, living in England, Canada, and the United States, every one of which has cold water and generally poor beaches, they all know how to swim. And in Thailand, no. The Philippines, just as normal. Even nicer beaches. Why? It just doesn't make sense. But anyway, this was a woman who was breaking the rule, the taboo of a Thai woman swimming. Not only was she swimming, she was going a step forward, kite surfing. So I first checked out. I must be wrong, right? You look Thai. Yes, I'm Thai. Another broken taboo right there. She actually spoke English. Almost no one in Thailand does. I said, so why are you kite surfing when no one else wants to swim? Now she said, oh, those sissies, right? She's already telling me she's not identifying with being Thai, though. I said, so you have an Australian accent. Where were you raised? She said, since I was 2, I was in Australia. And now it all made sense. Why? Because Aussie girls learn that to be good Aussie girls, they have to be outgoing and tough and, independent and all that. And so, of course, she would have grown up not with Thai girls saying, oh, I don't want to touch the water. She would have grown up with Australian girls that said, come on, let's have some fun. Go jump in cold water, do this, push the envelope, be outgoing, do something adventuresome. And then she would have watched everyone laugh and encourage and say, good on you, mate, and reward that behavior. And so she adopted it. She copied Australian cult. And so she happened to be in Thailand at the time, but of course she was behaving like an Australian woman of that age, having been raised there for 2 years old. So that was the answer to the mystery. So why does that happen? So she spoke more Australian than Thai. She spoke with an Australian accent. She thought with an Australian mind. But her ancestry was Thai. She was in Thailand. And so her cultural identity was stronger than, obviously, her blood identity. Because if it was all about blood, she would have still behaved like the Thai people, whether she was in Australia or not. Her blood doesn't change. Her genes didn't change. But her identity changed, and with it, her behavior. It's called the law of mass, which has an overtone of domination. The law of mass says that when a bowling ball and a pinball collide, the pinball goes flying. The bowling ball continues on its trajectory minus the mass of the pinball. So if the pinball is 1/100th the size of a bowling ball, if it takes 100 pinballs to get the weight and volume of a bowling ball, the bowling ball will keep moving on its trajectory and have to hit 100 pinballs before it stops. 100 pinballs will stop a bowling ball in its track. Then the next pinball that hits the bowling ball with any velocity will start spinning it back the way it came. That's the law of mass. The law of mass says that when a large object encounters a small object, the large object in a physical encounter absorbs the energy of the small object and continues on its current trajectory. And culture is a large object. It's larger than the individual ego in time, because most cultures, like American culture, is 400 years old. So I'm 45, so American culture is 10 times bigger than me in time. But it's 300 million times bigger than me in volume. Because American culture is simply what a group of Americans have all agreed to do at a given point of time. We, everyone in the South, agree to talk and say y'all. We've all agreed that. So you're going to hear y'all, 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 again and again and again and again. It wears away at you. You want to say hello, and there's y'all, and what's going on here? And you can think of it as kind of sandpaper. This is me, and then your environment sands away who is you and leaves what is it. You start off cheerful. You meet a violent person who slaps you off in the face. A little bit of your cheerfulness is sanded away. Another person scowls at you and tells you you're a jerk. Again, not quite so cheerful as you were before. Sanded away. Another person kicks you in the groin and says, I'm going to kick you every single time I see you. We don't want you around here. You're different. Cults are terrified of change. They don't like anything. So now you're expecting to be kicked for the next 300 days that you're in this proximity. Well, is there anything left of your cheerfulness after 10 of these encounters? Or are you left with the energy that was there? The hostility, the fear, the anger, the cruelty, etc., that was all there around you. So in this way, human states are infectious. Partly it's mirror neurons, partly etc., but also you've got the law of mass. I'm not going to make 10 miserable people cheerful as a general rule. But being around 10 miserable people is going to diminish some of my cheerfulness the vast majority of the time, statistically speaking. So mass equals a certain amount of domination. This Emotional Life, an accidental PBS series, because emotions in the United States, along with everything feminine, are studied accidentally and with a lower priority than everything masculine. And I'm not talking gender here. I'm talking every man and every woman has feelings. We just managed to go through a Western education without spending a single hour on emotional literacy. Who was the one that says, let's see, mental literacy, let's spend 99% of our time with that. Emotional literacy, let's shame and avoid it. Someone came up with that, and the cult adopted it. And so you have this phenomena of mass. When an infant who is dependent on a family and a cult for survival, security, love and belonging, and a sense of self-esteem, when an infant is surrounded by giants upon which it depends in a helpless state, the drive to feel survive, to feel secure, have love and belonging and self-esteem insist that the infant adopt the traits, copy the traits of the parents, who copies the traits of their parents and the cult around them. So you have these things drawing the ego, the identity, into alignment with its environment. Now then you have a couple of lighter drives as well. It's more fun to relate to other consciousness than not to relate. You know, this whole conversation could be taking place in the language of Hing. And you would, of course, have absolutely no knowledge of Hing. And I would know that you had no knowledge of that because it's a language that I invented. And it's just not as much fun to spend an hour talking in a language that no one else understands than it is to talk an hour in a language that most people are going to at least grasp the meaning of the words. It's more fun to connect with people than to dissociate with people. And it is our nature to connect as a species. There's also, you cannot partner with another human being without attuning and connecting to them. At a more profound level, you could say you cannot love a human being without connecting with them. And you cannot partner with them without loving them to some extent. Now, love has a technical meaning, and so to some extent, if you look at the blooming process, the viral nature of adult love. So let's take a look. We start out with the love of the child, which is I need. Every child needs, and so that's its template of connection. The love of bonding for a child is I need, you have, you need to give me what I need. And there's a bargain there. The parent says, fine, you make me look good, you make me feel good, you speak my language, and we'll mediate in there. There's a negotiation that goes on to say that you're my child, but if you're my child because you copy me, then I will give you what you want. But the child says, I need, I want, you have, therefore we are connected. I need, you have, therefore we are connected. The adolescent, the antithesis, the rebellion of need and stuff like that, but also the lust. I lust. I want. I need. I want. The adolescent's engagement with sexuality. I need to touch. I need to feel. I want. So, therefore, we must connect. An adolescent girl hot with the discovery of sexuality doesn't say, oh, you've got finals tomorrow, let's not kiss. Let's stop kissing, because you've got finals tomorrow and that would be better for you, etc. No, I need this now. And, nothing else exists. That's the nature of adolescent love. It is self-centered need as a child. It is self-centered lust as an adolescent. It is self-centered exploration as a young adult. I'm going to explore the world. I'm going to discover this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And if you love me, if there's any room for love in my life, it's because you're supporting me. If you love me, you will pay for my trip around the world. You'll wait for me. You'll do this, etc. Because I need this. And so the person who loves me will make that happen. So we have, again, 3 forms of narcissism: the child, the adolescent, the young adult. The adult, in the synergistic process of going through those stages effectively, as opposed to being arrested, because when a child doesn't get the need met, they stay emotionally a child. I need this, I'm going to die without this. An arrested child can be 85 years old. But at that moment of desperate vulnerability, they were traumatized at 3 years old. And that's how they feel today, 3 years old. A traumatized person doesn't deal with the world as an adult. I'm a terrified child in need, or I'm an adolescent, or I'm a young adult, or I'm a mixture of these two, but there's no adult there. Because it's hard for a self-centered, traumatized child to raise an adult because the child is copying the parental figure. If the parental figure has PTSD, and when the child desperately needs, in that self-centered state, the adult answers, well, I'm bigger than you and I desperately need. I need you to stop crying. I need you to disappear. I need you to lie and tell me you're feeling this rather than this. Otherwise, my need is so important as a grown-up child that I'll hit you, that I'll bully you, that I'll terrorize you, that I'll leave you, that I'll kick you, that I'll humiliate you in public. Because I'm a desperate narcissistic child in a giant's body who can dominate you, a narcissistic traumatized child, in a small body. The law of mass. I'm bigger than you. Nothing you can do about it. So the child says, okay, I'll be like you. Just don't leave me. So I become a grown-up, terrified bully. I become whatever it was that I saw there. And I'm still looking out there for how do we deal with this? I'm looking for that. I don't know how to do it. Because no one's ever done that for that childlike part in me. If they have, it was so fleeting, it was quickly eclipsed by all this other modeling. So the adult, when the adult emerges and is not arrested through various traumatic incidents in the state of the child, the adolescent, the young adult, the adult emerges and it begins with self-love. The adult loves the child enough to care, the inner child, and cares enough to see the inner child, and sees enough to understand the inner child, and understands enough to empathize with the inner child, and empathizes enough to attune to to the inner child and attunes enough to gather feedback, and gathers feedback on the attunement process enough to succeed, and succeeds enough to bestow upon the child survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, the development of gifts, the bringing of those gifts out into the world, and the awareness of something bigger than the self. For the child, that becomes the adolescent. And then the adult loves the adolescent inside enough to care, cares enough to see, sees enough to understand, understands enough to empathize, empathizes enough to attune, attunes enough to succeed at helping the adolescent, feels that it can survive as the identity of the adolescent, which is I want, I don't want, I want to rebel. The adolescent loves enough to care and to see and attune so that the adolescent can be what the adolescent is. A lust-filled, passionate rebel that is curious and learning how things work on an emotional and biological level, so that they can succeed at being an adolescent level, to explore their sensuality. And so that they can be secure in that success, that they can feel love and belonging and okay as they are as an adolescent in that mode. And so they can develop a sense of self-esteem, that they accept who they are, their sensuality, their sexuality, their curiosity, their rebellion, that this can be integrated in the adult who accepts the adolescent within. The adult is a synergy that emerges out of the adult, or out of the child, the adolescent, the young adult. The adult is a synergy that emerges in that dynamic. It's bigger than any one of them. And so then the adolescent succeeds at transcending itself, that becomes the young adult, the explorer, the the one that goes out, I want to do this, and I want to do that, I want to see who I am. The young adult is created by the transcendence of the adolescence, who was loved enough to go through that process, inwardly or outwardly. And of course, it's harder to do on the inside what was never done on the outside. And now you have an adult that loves itself because it loves the child, the adolescent, the young adult, which is its foundation. So you have a self-actualized individual. Now you have the adult that explores, how do I like to love? How can I love myself enough to care about myself enough to see myself enough to understand myself enough to empathize with myself, have compassion for myself. See, now we're moving towards a self-loved individual. That, 0.5% of our population, often over the age of 50, is capable of knowing what love is and loving the self. Once I love myself, my child, my adolescent, my young adult, myself as an adult, now I am capable of transcending the self, of loving myself enough to be a part of something more. What? A community, a family, a species. And that's when love can become viral. That's when I love you enough to care about you enough to see you enough to understand you enough to empathize with you enough to attune enough to succeed at helping you meet your needs for survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing your gifts, bringing those gifts out into the world, and transcending your limited sense of self to help you go through as a child, as an adolescent, as a young adult, etc., and transcend that limited sense of self to become part of a larger self, the self out of which the identity, the ego, emerge, as a less than 1% of the self that is conscious, as the possibility field becomes the actual field. As the possibility field becomes the actuality field, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, more and more finite. But it becomes fully conscious. So as you experience competent loving by an adult, it's not the adolescent and child love. It's not I love you, therefore I need you to do this and this. I love you, therefore I need to have sex with you. These are the that's not adult love. I love you enough to see you to the extent that you're willing and able to be seen. I see you enough to understand you to the extent that you're willing to participate and be understood, so as your survival moves into your security of your survival, your security. Now, when you experience being loved by an adult in that way, and you understand that the only common thread underneath all of those postures, all of those words, all of those beings, and all of those behaviors over time is to watch you meet every one of your human needs to survive, to feel secure, to feel love and belonging, to have self-esteem in your way. Not other people's self-esteem, like you should believe in this because I do. Self-esteem means that I pick my ideals. I have this ideal. I think modern things should be modern. Okay, that's your ideal. So what does that look like for you? How do you become modern? Now that you've believed that modern is good, how do you become a modern woman or a modern man? Well, I think I have to do this and this and this. So being loving as an adult is, okay, how can I help? How can you be more modern? Well, I can't have you around me. You're not very modern. Okay, great. I'll keep my distance. Anything else I can do? So that you can have a sense of earned self-esteem, becoming the person you believe in, you want to be, and then move beyond that to become proficient at your gifts, and move beyond that to bring those gifts powerfully and beautifully into the world, and then move beyond the limited identity that you hold of yourself to become part of something bigger than yourself, the human needs. By the time that you have become a part of something bigger than yourself and fulfilled all of your human needs, if you've watched another human being patiently be by your side with no other agenda other than you becoming your best version of you. Sleep with me, not, doesn't matter, marry this person, marry that. I want to see you become the best version of you. Makes me happy. How can I help? The gratitude that emerges, the joy, the love, the sense of closeness, the sense of oneness that comes from encountering another human being capable of holding that intention, that pattern of energy and behavior called adult love, year after year after year. So overwhelming. It transcends words. And you feel as one. You don't need to have a boundary with that person. You don't have to say, that's mine. This person is in service to me becoming my best me. If they have more of my stuff, that gets used in service of me being my best me, probably more intelligently than I can use it. I don't need this illusion of this is me and this is you anymore. The virus of adult love spreads. Because once you've experienced that once from some person, it's the most meaningful, it's the most fun, it's the most beautiful, it's the most valuable experience of a lifetime. And part of the reason that's easy to say is it's rare in our cult to experience an adult, someone who's actually competently loved all of what's within and has transcended the natural myopia of self-centeredness to start loving another, and then learn to love another. And then it's even just as rare for someone to know how to be loved. Because let's say you do encounter the odd adult that shows an interest in who you are becoming and blah, blah, blah. And they try to see you, and it's like, what are you looking at? Don't look at me. I'm a shameful person. Because we don't breed identities in our cult that know how to be loved. They know how to be shamed. So to see is a precursor to shame for a shame-based person. So someone might be prevented from being an adult because someone is technically unlovable. The first step, caring to love enough to care, is met with the defense in the culture, why do you care? I don't know you. Why do you care? Next, stop looking at me. Why are you... So to care enough to see, what are you looking at? What are you looking at? Don't look at me. Go away, right? No love wanted around here. We're suspicious of love because we've encountered too many children, too many adolescents. As the adolescent figures out that in this cult, if it just says, what do you want? Oh, I want to explore your boobs. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to see what happens because I'm exploring. Well, get lost. Oh, I thought you wanted to know what I wanted. Well, clearly not. So we have to invent all kinds of machinations, right, for the adolescent to be an adolescent. Well, by the time people have been manipulated by desperate adolescents, a few thousand times, they can't recognize an adult that doesn't have... No, you've got an agenda for something. And adults truly are rare. Competent, loving adults are rare, and the adult is the part that is capable of loving first itself and then going out to others. So you have that, you have that pattern of adult love, which enables partnering, which enables synergy, and is a hell of a lot more fun than the narcissistic scarcity of the isolated and unloved adolescent child and traumatized, wounded self. Which is why reality is destined to move towards that direction. Because every human being in the history of humanity has wanted to feel sustainably better and avoid feeling chronically worse. And being loving, becoming an adult towards oneself and then towards other people, and being loved by other adults, and helping those that are still stuck in child and adolescent, etc., to move in that direction is the single most satisfying thing that a human consciousness is capable of doing. In order to love, you have to connect with what is there. If I talk Ing and you speak English, there's no connection. So you don't get to see me. Particularly in a cult like our own, where we've been taught to pay attention to words more than vibration. So if I can't put it into words, it may be screaming out there on multiple dimensions what I'm saying, but you've been trained not to pay attention to that because in your cult, that wasn't real. And it was upsetting to the giants around you to acknowledge this energy and this energy and this energy. So it's a very important thing to understand that for the most part, we are separate ego identities arrested in various states of development with overlays of biological trauma and with clear messages that we must copy insane, somewhat rational, and rational aspects of our cults in order to meet our human needs. And that copying requires lying, requires silence, requires modification, requires pushing away the authentic self. The authentic self that wants to regrow from the wound as a beautiful and symmetrical self.